Welcome to Cheating Story Exposed. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. Every day we uncover the truth, one secret at a time. My name is Owen, and this is the story of how I watched my brother fake cancer, drain my father's life savings, and nearly destroy our family before I quietly gathered enough evidence to expose him in court. Some people say I went too far. Others say I didn't go far enough. But after 9 months of watching him lie, manipulate, and steal from the man who raised us, I knew exactly what I had to do. I need you to understand something about my brother, Trevor, before we go any further. Growing up, he was always the favorite. Not because my parents loved him more, but because he needed more. He was the kid who got into trouble at school and needed defending. The teenager who wrecked his car and needed bailing out. The college dropout who needed a job at Dad's construction company when nothing else worked out. My parents, especially Dad, always gave him another chance. Always believed his excuses. Always wanted to believe the best in him. Me, I was the boring one. I went to state school, got my accounting degree, married my high school girlfriend Lena, and took a stable job at a mid-sized firm. I didn't ask my parents for money after I turned 22. I didn't need to be rescued. And maybe that's why when Trevor's crisis came, nobody thought to question it. After all, Trevor always had crises. This one just seemed more serious than usual. It started on a Tuesday in March. Dad called me at work, which was unusual. He was crying, which was unheard of. Dad was a 71-year-old former Marine who'd built houses with his bare hands for 40 years. I'd seen him cry exactly twice in my life, when Mom died 6 years ago and when his own father passed. So when I heard his voice breaking over the phone, my stomach dropped. "It's your brother," he said. "Owen, it's bad, it's really bad." Trevor had stage 3 pancreatic cancer. That's what Dad told me. Trevor had been feeling sick for months, finally went to the doctor, and the diagnosis came back devastating. 6 months to live, maybe less, without aggressive treatment. There was a specialist in Houston, 3 hours away, who had a new experimental protocol. Insurance wouldn't cover most of it. The initial consultation alone was $8,000. Dad was already making arrangements to pay. I drove to Dad's house that night. Trevor was there, looking thinner than I remembered, his face pale and drawn. He hugged me, and I felt his ribs through his shirt. He cried on my shoulder and said he was scared. He said he didn't want to die. He said he wished Mom was still here to help him through this. And I believed him. God help me, in that moment I completely believed him. The money started flowing almost immediately. Dad was retired, living on his pension and the retirement account he'd built over decades of careful saving. It wasn't a fortune, but it was comfortable. About $400,000 meant to last him the rest of his life. Trevor needed $8,000 for the consultation, then $12,000 for the first round of treatments, then $25,000 for a specialized scan, then $15,000 for medications that insurance denied. Then another $30,000 for an intensive 2-week treatment program. Within the first 2 months, Dad had withdrawn over $90,000. He never hesitated. He sold Mom's car, the one he'd kept in the garage, because he couldn't bear to part with it. He took out a reverse mortgage on the house. He cashed in bonds. He borrowed against his life insurance, all for Trevor. The family rallied around him. My aunt and uncle contributed $5,000. Cousins organized a GoFundMe that raised another $8,000. People from Dad's church, guys he'd worked with for years, they all donated. There was a fundraiser breakfast at the VFW. Trevor showed up looking weak and grateful, thanking everyone for their support, promising to fight hard because he didn't want to let anyone down. And me? I contributed $3,000 from Lena's and my savings. I visited every week. I sat with Trevor and Dad and listened to updates about treatments and experimental drugs and survival statistics. I held my father while he cried and said he couldn't lose another person he loved. I was the supportive brother, the dutiful son. But something felt wrong. I can't tell you exactly when the doubts started. Maybe it was the 4th month, when Trevor mentioned needing another 40,000 for a new protocol, but couldn't name the specific hospital where he was being treated. Maybe it was when I offered to drive him to his next appointment, and he suddenly got defensive and said he preferred to go alone because it was too emotionally draining to have family there. Maybe it was the time I stopped by his apartment unannounced and found him looking perfectly healthy, eating takeout and playing video games, and when I asked how he was feeling, he quickly clutched his stomach and said the pain came and went. Or maybe it was the moment I actually started paying attention to the paperwork. Trevor would bring Dad stacks of medical bills and insurance statements. They always looked official enough, printed on letterhead, covered in medical codes, stamped with clinic names. But I'm an accountant. I look at documents for a living. I notice patterns, inconsistencies, details that don't quite line up. And one night in June, while Dad was in the bathroom and Trevor was outside taking a phone call, I took pictures of 3 of the bills sitting on the kitchen table. The next day at work, during my lunch break, I examined them carefully. The letterhead was for Houston Advanced Oncology Center. I looked them up online. The clinic existed. They had a website, reviews, photos of their facilities, but something about the bills bothered me. The formatting was slightly off. The font didn't quite match their official documents. The provider ID number seemed too short, so I called them. I pretended to be Trevor, said I needed to verify some billing information, and gave them his date of birth and the account number from the statement. They put me on hold for 7 minutes. When they came back, they told me they had no record of any patient by that name. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I called back thinking I'd made a mistake. I spoke to a different receptionist, gave her the same information. Same answer, no patient record found. I asked if maybe the records were under a different facility or if there was another Houston Advanced Oncology Center. She was polite but firm. No records, no appointments, no treatments. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes staring at my phone. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. Trevor was sick. I'd seen him lose weight. I'd seen the pain in his face. I'd held him while he cried about dying. This had to be a clerical error, a mix-up in the system, something. But I'm an accountant, and accountants verify. We don't assume. We check. I went to 2 more clinics mentioned on other bills over the next week. Same story, no patient records. One of them actually laughed when I described the letterhead and said they'd been dealing with scammers using fake versions of their documents for months. They gave me the number for their fraud department. That's when I knew. That's when the grief and confusion turned into something cold and focused. My brother wasn't sick. My brother was stealing from our father, and he was using the most evil, manipulative lie possible to do it. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell Dad. I didn't tell Lena, not at first. Because here's what I understood immediately. If I accused Trevor without ironclad proof, he would deny everything, Dad would defend him, and I would become the villain. The jealous brother, the one who couldn't stand seeing Trevor get attention. The one who valued money over family. I'd seen how Trevor operated my entire life. He was charming, persuasive, and when backed into a corner, he could cry and apologize and make you feel like the bad guy for doubting him. So instead, I started building a case. I opened a locked folder on my personal laptop. Every piece of evidence went in there. Every suspicious document, every phone call recording where state law allowed, every bank statement I could get access to, every screenshot, every receipt. I created a timeline of every dollar Dad had withdrawn and every supposed medical expense Trevor had claimed. I contacted hospitals and clinics. I filed information requests. I hired a private investigator for $1,200 to track where Trevor was actually going on days he claimed to have treatments. The investigator's report came back 3 weeks later. On the days Trevor was supposedly at hospitals in Houston, he was actually at a casino in Louisiana. On other days, he was at his girlfriend's apartment in San Antonio, A woman named Bryn none of us knew existed. He'd bought her a car. He'd paid for a vacation to Cancun. He'd deposited money in cryptocurrency accounts. He was living a secret life funded entirely by our father's retirement savings. I felt physically sick reading that report. This wasn't just fraud. This wasn't just theft. This was evil. This was looking our 71-year-old father in the eyes, watching him cry and beg God not to take his son, and then driving off with his money to gamble and party with some woman while Dad ate ramen noodles and sold off everything Mom had loved because he was terrified of losing Trevor. But I still didn't say anything, because I needed more. I needed it to be undeniable. I needed to protect Dad from the inevitable moment when Trevor would lie and manipulate and try to wriggle free. In August, Trevor announced he needed another $60,000 for a new treatment. This one was the real deal, he said. It could save his life. Dad didn't have it liquid. He'd already drained most of his retirement account. So Trevor suggested he sell the house. Just downsize to something smaller, something more manageable anyway at his age. They could split the equity, and Dad could live somewhere cheaper while Trevor got his life-saving treatment. That's when I knew I was running out of time. If Dad sold that house, the house where I grew up, the house he'd built with his own hands the year before I was born, the house where Mom had died in the bedroom upstairs, I would never forgive myself. And worse, Dad would have nothing left. He'd be destitute, dependent on me or Trevor for the rest of his life, all because he'd given everything to save a son who was never sick. I told Lena everything that night. I showed her the evidence. She cried, then got angry, then helped me organize the files. She's a paralegal, and she knew exactly what I needed to make this airtight. We worked until 3 in the morning, building a comprehensive dossier with witness statements, financial records, phone records, investigator reports, medical fraud documentation, and a timeline that tracked every lie Trevor had told. Then I contacted a lawyer. His name was Gregory Paxton, and he specialized in elder financial abuse cases. I paid him $2,000 for a consultation and brought him everything I had. He sat in his office for over an hour, reading through page after page, and when he finally looked up at me, his expression was grim. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of elder abuse and fraud I've ever seen, he said. Your father has grounds to sue for full restitution, and your brother could face criminal charges. But you need to understand something. This will destroy your family. Your father will have to accept that his son did this. It will break him. He's already broken, I said. He's 71 years old. And eating 1 meal a day because he's spending everything on fake medical treatments. If I don't stop this now, Trevor will take everything and disappear, and Dad will die alone and broke. At least this way, there's a chance to recover something. Gregory nodded. Then let's do it right. We filed a civil lawsuit in late August for fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. We simultaneously contacted the district attorney's office and provided them with the evidence for potential criminal charges. We filed for an emergency injunction to freeze Trevor's assets, including the bank accounts where we'd traced Dad's money. And then, because I needed to protect Dad from making any more devastating decisions, I had the hardest conversation of my life. I drove to Dad's house on a Saturday morning. Trevor wasn't there. I sat Dad down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten breakfast as kids, and I told him everything. I showed him the evidence. I walked him through the timeline. I let him call the hospitals himself and hear them say there were no records. I showed him the photos the investigator had taken of Trevor at the casino, laughing and drinking with Bryn. Dad didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there, staring at the papers spread across the table, his hands shaking. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. How much is left? I'd run the numbers a dozen times. About $48,000 in your retirement account. The house still has equity, but with the reverse mortgage, it's maybe $120,000 if you sold it. The rest is gone. How much did he take? roughly $230,000 over 9 months. Dad put his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat there, and I watched my father age 10 years in 10 minutes. Finally, he looked up at me with eyes so hollow it hurt to meet them. "Is this real, Owen? Tell me this is real and I'm not losing my mind." "It's real, Dad. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." He nodded slowly. "What do we do now?" "We go to court. We get back what we can, and we make sure he can't do this to anyone else." Trevor found out about the lawsuit 2 days later when he was served with papers. He called me immediately, screaming, calling me every name you can imagine. I didn't engage. I just told him he could explain everything to the judge and hung up. He called Dad next, crying, swearing it was all a misunderstanding, begging for a chance to explain. Dad didn't take the call. Trevor hired a lawyer, some guy who specialized in defending lost causes. Over the next several weeks, they tried every tactic they could think of. They claimed I'd fabricated evidence. They said I was jealous and vindictive. They insisted Trevor had been scammed himself by fake doctors and was just as much a victim. They even claimed he actually did have cancer, just not the kind that showed up in those specific hospital records, and that he'd been seeking alternative treatments. Every argument fell apart under the weight of documentation. The criminal charges came in October. The DA's office filed multiple counts of fraud, theft, and elder abuse. Trevor's bail was set at $50,000. He couldn't make it. For 3 weeks, he sat in county jail, and I didn't lose a single night of sleep over it. His girlfriend Bryn posted bail eventually, probably using the money he'd given her, and he got out. But the damage was done. The court had frozen his accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. His lawyer knew it. Everyone knew it. The civil trial was scheduled for early November. Dad didn't want to testify, but Gregory explained he had to. Trevor had the right to face his accuser, and Dad was the victim. So on a cold Thursday morning, we walked into that courthouse together. Dad wore the same suit he'd worn to Mom's funeral. His hands shook the entire time. Trevor was already there, sitting with his lawyer. Looking thin and pale, but this time I knew it wasn't cancer. It was guilt and fear and the knowledge that everything was about to collapse. When he saw us walk in, his face crumbled. He started to stand up like he wanted to come talk to us, but his lawyer pulled him back down. The trial took 2 days. I testified first, walking the jury through every piece of evidence, every timeline discrepancy, every fake document. I was calm, methodical, professional. I handed Gregory each exhibit, explained what it showed, and watched the jury's faces shift from curiosity to shock to disgust. Trevor's lawyer tried to rattle me during cross-examination, suggesting I was motivated by inheritance concerns or sibling rivalry. I looked him in the eye and said, "My father is 71 years old and almost lost his home because he believed his son was dying. I'm motivated by stopping that from happening." Dad testified on the second day. It was brutal. Gregory had to walk him through every withdrawal, every moment he'd believed Trevor's lies, every time he'd gone without so Trevor could have more. Dad's voice broke multiple times. At one point, the judge called a recess because Dad couldn't continue. During the break, I saw Trevor crying at the defense table, but I felt nothing. You don't get to cry when you're the one who caused the pain. The investigator testified. The hospital representatives testified. A forensic accountant testified about the money trail. A document expert testified about the fake medical bills. One by one, every piece of Trevor's defense fell apart. Trevor's lawyer put him on the stand in the afternoon. It was a disaster. Trevor tried to claim he'd been confused, overwhelmed, that he genuinely believed he was sick because of symptoms he was experiencing and had trusted the wrong people. But under cross-examination, Gregory destroyed him. He walked Trevor through every specific lie, every detail that couldn't be explained away. He showed Trevor the photos from the casino, from the vacation, from the car he'd bought Bryn. He asked Trevor to name a single real doctor he'd seen. Trevor couldn't. The moment I'll remember forever came near the end. Gregory held up a bank statement showing a $40,000 withdrawal from Dad's account, dated the same week Dad had sold Mom's car. "Mr. Holloway," Gregory said, "can you tell the jury what you were doing the day this money entered your account?" Trevor stared at the paper. His face went white. He knew the investigator had tracked him. He knew we had proof. I can't remember specifically. You were in Shreveport, Louisiana at the Silver Star Casino. You lost $26,000 at blackjack that weekend. Is that correct? The courtroom went silent. Trevor's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked at his lawyer, then at Dad, then at me. And then he just collapsed, not physically, but emotionally. His shoulders sagged, his head dropped, and he started crying like a child. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just kept getting bigger and I couldn't stop it, and I'm sorry, Dad, please, I'm so sorry." The judge banged his gavel. Trevor's lawyer tried to salvage something, but it was over. Everyone in that room knew it was over. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. They found in Dad's favor on every count. The judgment was for full restitution of $230,000 plus legal fees plus damages. In total, Trevor owed Dad just over $300,000. The judge ordered the frozen accounts liquidated immediately and applied to the judgment. He ordered Trevor's car sold. He ordered wage garnishment for anything Trevor earned going forward. He made it clear that Trevor would be paying this debt for the rest of his life. The criminal trial came 6 weeks later. Trevor took a plea deal rather than face a jury again. 5 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 3. Restitution as a condition of his release, a permanent criminal record, everything. Dad and I walked out of the courthouse that final day into cold December air. It had started snowing, light flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground. Dad stood on the steps for a long time, just breathing, staring at nothing. "Did we do the right thing?" he asked finally. I thought about that question. I thought about everything Trevor had taken. Not just money, but trust, security, peace. I thought about how Dad had been willing to give up everything because he loved his son and believed the best in him. I thought about how that love had been weaponized and exploited. I thought about what would have happened if I hadn't stopped it. "Yeah," I said. "We did the right thing." Dad nodded. We walked to the car. We drove home. We didn't talk about Trevor again that day. It's been almost a year now since the civil judgment. The criminal restitution has been paying out slowly. So far, Dad's recovered about $85,000 between the frozen accounts, the car sale, and garnishments. It's not everything. It'll never be everything. But it's enough that Dad isn't eating ramen anymore. It's enough that the house is safe. It's enough. Trevor writes letters from prison. Dad doesn't read them. He gives them to me and I file them away unopened. Maybe someday he'll want to read them. Maybe someday he'll be ready to forgive. But that's his choice to make, not mine. People ask me if I regret it. If I wish I'd handled it differently, maybe tried to work it out as a family instead of going to court. And my answer is always the same. I didn't destroy my brother. He destroyed himself the moment he decided that my father's life savings were worth less than his gambling habit. I just made sure there were consequences. The hardest part isn't the aftermath or the family fractures or the cousins who think I was too harsh. The hardest part is knowing that. For 9 months, I watched it happen. I watched Trevor steal, I watched Dad suffer, and I said nothing because I was gathering evidence. Some nights I wonder if I could have stopped it sooner, if I could have saved Dad more pain, if I made the right choice by waiting. But then I remember what Gregory told me in his office that first day. If I'd confronted Trevor without proof, Dad would have defended him, and Trevor would have just gotten better at hiding the theft. By waiting, by documenting everything, I made it impossible for him to escape justice. I protected Dad from being manipulated again. And I made sure that when the truth came out, it came out so clearly that no one could deny it. That has to count for something. Lena and I bought Dad dinner last week. Just the 3 of us at the Italian place he and Mom used to love. He laughed for the first time in months, telling old stories about construction jobs gone wrong and the time he accidentally put a window in upside down. It was good to hear him laugh. It was good to see him eating without worry. It was good to know he's going to be okay. As we were leaving, Dad hugged me in the parking lot. He held on longer than usual. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For seeing what I couldn't, for protecting me, thank you." I didn't know what to say to that. So I just hugged him back and told him I loved him, because that's what this was really about. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice, really. It was about love. The kind of love that does the hard thing, the painful thing, the thing that costs you relationships and sleepless nights and the comfort of pretending everything's fine. The kind of love that gathers evidence for 9 months because you know confrontation without proof will only make things worse. The kind of love that sits in a courtroom and watches your brother's life fall apart because it's the only way to save your father's. Trevor made his choices. He chose to lie, to steal, to exploit. The unconditional love of a man who'd given him everything. And those choices had consequences. I just made sure the consequences actually happened. If there's a lesson in all this, it's that sometimes love looks like accountability. Sometimes protecting someone means exposing the truth, no matter how much it hurts. And sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is stand up in court and prove that the person your family wants to protect is the person they need protection from. I don't know if Trevor will ever take responsibility for what he did. I don't know if he'll serve his full sentence or if he'll learn anything from this. I don't know if Dad will ever be able to forgive him or if I will. What I do know is that Dad's safe now. His home is secure. And the next time someone tries to take advantage of his kindness, there will be consequences. That has to be enough. Because in the end, that's all any of us can do. Protect the people we love, document the truth, and trust that justice will follow. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, or if you've experienced something similar, leave a comment below. And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let someone you care about be victimized, even if it means standing against another person you love. Hit subscribe so you never miss the next story. This is Cheating Story Exposed, where every day we uncover the truth, one secret at a time.